Good evening. Call to order this November 4th meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council and ask the City Secretary to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Larson.
Present.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Bessie.
Here.
Councilmember Scipio.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Here.
Councilmember Adams.
Here.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Present.
Thank you. Would you please join the City Council with me in a moment of silence? Thank you. And would you join the City Council with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our Sergeant at Arms tonight is Lieutenant Vince Rega. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us tonight. Tonight's agenda of the City Council is comprised of the following items. There are 7 zoning petitions, and there are 3 items related to appointments to boards and commissions. The zoning petitions are listed as public hearings. When the public hearing is called, a person in the council chamber will be given an opportunity to speak. If no one wishes to speak, I'll close the public hearing, and the City Council will consider the item. If there is opposition to the zoning petitions, the proponents and opponents will each be given 15 minutes for presentation and 3 minutes for rebuttal. Today's meeting is being televised live tonight on TV 13, and it will be replayed tomorrow at 9 a.m. and again Wednesday at 9 p.m. Of course, copies of our agenda as well as videos of our meeting are always available online on the city's website, and just click on the Watch Meetings Online option. Council members, items Z1 and Z7 have been requested for continuance, so without objection, we'll consider those first. We'll have Z1, please.
Item Z1, public hearing on zoning petition of 1520 Dune Street for reasonable accommodation.
Motion to continue that item.
Move for approval.
So moved. Second.
Motion second to continue the item to the January 6th meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes, and anyone opposed, vote no. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Now we'll look at item Z7.
Item Z7, public hearing on zoning petition of Salem Creek Properties LLC, Louder Recycling and Disposal LLC, Bruce Donald Saylor and Peggy Logan Saylor, from RS9 GI and GIS to LIL. Property is located on the north side of Kester Mill Road and northern terminus of Blue Rock Court, located in the southwest ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Recognize Councilmember Bessie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The petitioner has requested a continuance. They are actually meeting this evening with some of the interested neighbors to discuss the case. So I move to continue item Z7 to the City Council's December 2nd, 2019 meeting.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. All those in favor of that motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Councilmember Bessie. Now we go to item Z2.
Item Z2, continuation of zoning petition of Bobby Joe Carmichael and NCDOT from RS9 and CPOS to CPOS. Property is located on the west side of Burke Mill Road, north of I-40, located in the southwest ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition. This item received a motion of no consideration at the October 21st, 2019 City Council meeting after the public hearing was closed.
And that's important information. The public hearing was closed. There'll be no public hearing on this tonight. I'd recognize Councilmember Bessie for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For clarity, I will restate the motion that I made at the previous meeting. I move for approval of 1, the statement of consistency for approval of this item, that's W3418, and W3418.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Larson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, fellow council members. I was the one who put this on no consideration, and I'd like to make a comment, if I may.
Please, go ahead.
All right. This is, to be clear, is not about the quality and the contribution that's made by Truliant to this city. I want to be very, very clear about that. Truliant has an excellent reputation and is appreciated by the full council. This is about roads and traffic patterns and the confidence that the public has in the process of making determinations. And to summarize, this council approved a $150,000 study to be made of Burke Mill Road as a comprehensive study from one end of it to the other, from basically Silas Creek to Stratford Road. And this was based on early complaints that I received when I first came on to council, and that is it was a problem on this road that has been long overdue and not being addressed properly. The council took that under advisement and took, I think, very corrective and brave action to undertake that. In the middle of this study, however, True Liant came forward with a need that they expressed and basically then stepped to the front of the line in trying to get that problem resolved. The neighborhoods who initiated the study, of course, were waiting for that study to be completed. And now, suddenly, the conversation turned from the overall study and its results to one specific part of that study. And that dominated the conversation from that point on. As recent as the last meeting that we held in which it was voted upon, there were discussions about reports coming in, that there was nothing to be changed in the report, that the consultant that had been chosen to do the specific study that True Liant had helped fund actually would not provide any new findings. During that public hearing, of course, it became revealed that $13,000 had basically been contributed by True Liant to get their name in front of the list, basically, to put them on the study. And I maybe could ask staff to comment on that, but as a result of that, a lot of conversation was over about the nature of the study, whether it had been contaminated, whether or not it had been compromised, the authenticity of the agenda had been severely altered by the insertion. Should one private company step in front, as it were, to make a statement that when the neighborhood had been asking for results from long ago that initiated the $150,000 study. And I think there was a lot of concern by the public that their needs had been overruled or overseen as a result of the True Liant effort to get their driveways, to get their access route, and to get all of this resolved. And as a result, the neighborhoods have been very concerned that, in fact, the study had maybe been compromised, or that, in fact, their concerns had not been heard, and that everything was focused and had been redirected to the True Liant affairs. Last Thursday, I received in my packet a document that showed the full length of the road that apparently is a preliminary study that had come out from the consultants, Davenport Consultants, that listed some 27 locations that had been examined up and down Burke Mill Road. And I think that was an important statement. I wish that had been available to discuss to the public when these other discussions were going on, that this work was in fact in progress and that there would be results relevant to their concerns to be revealed as the project went forward. I'm anxious that that report be made available and that the citizens who initiated this study in the first place understand that in fact the city is doing something on their behalf. And I would request then, as a motion, that we hold this until a public hearing is held to reveal the findings of this report, which are at least in draft form, so that they can understand the relevance of the work that True Liant is asking for in the broader context of the overall study that's being proposed, the $150,000 study. At most, I would anticipate this be a 2-month delay in the approval of this, and I request that this come back to the January meeting.
Mr. Larson's making a substitute motion that this item be continued. Is there a second? Hearing none, your motion is
Thank you.
out of order. And go ahead and vote on the motion that's in front of us. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. The motion passes 7-1. Councilmember Larson voting no. Thank you, Councilmember Bessie. Item Z3.
Item Z3, continuation of public hearing on final development plan and master plan amendment of Brookstown Development Partners, LLC, for a 277-unit multifamily development in PBS zoning district. Property is located on the west side of North Broad Street, north side of West 1st Street, and east side of West 2nd Street, located in the Northwest Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition. This item was continued from the October 7th, 2019 City Council meeting.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. We have individuals signed up on both sides, and we will hold the public hearing. First person signed up is Luke Dickey. If you would, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor and council
evening.
members. My name is
Good evening.
Luke Dickey
Good
with
evening.
Stimmel Associates, 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston-Salem 27101. See if I can get this presentation up for you here in just a second. All right. Thank you for your time this evening. What I'm going to discuss tonight is a plan that started roughly 12 years ago with the approval of the overall ballpark plan roughly in 2007. Project before you this evening is a $40 to $45 million, 300-unit multifamily development, and it represents a critical component of that plan that was approved in 2007. This is a project of significant scale and size and in proximity to downtown and linking it to the ballpark as well as to the West End area and Burke Road. This is a final development plan for approval. So the site has already been rezoned. This is an approved use for multifamily, and it all meets ordinance requirements. This was heard at the Planning Board, and Planning Board unanimously recommended approval of the plan, and there was no opposition at that hearing. I'd like to walk you through some key highlights right now of the site plan. Again, it's 300 units. It's within a 4 to 5 story building. We have a building on the north side that's mainly 4 stories, and then where it's on Broad Street, it goes to 5 stories. Then on the south side, fronting First Street, we have predominantly a 4-story structure, and then it's 5 stories on the corner of 2nd and 1st Street. You'll notice that there are multiple amenity areas that are kind of worked in to each one of the fingers of the site, so courtyards, pool, lounge area, then other sidewalk connections out to the perimeter along with the dog park. Main access to this site is going to be to the 400 space parking deck located in the center of the site off of 2nd Street, so there's no other curb cuts all the way around the perimeter of the site, so that's the main access point. Working with Winston-Salem DOT, they have required a median be in place for that, so that will prevent any leftovers on 2nd Street, as well as we're providing a right turn lane into the parking structure. On the north side of the project, is representing on this is a 0.6 acre park that will be dedicated to the city of Winston-Salem. Developer has agreed with this park to construct it and then enter in a maintenance and operation agreement for this. So I see this as a good benefit to the city for a park that they will not have to maintain. And it also still provides an amenity to the surrounding area. Particularly, this is located in between this project and then West End Station, which is another large multifamily just across catty corner from 2nd Street and Green. As part of working on this development plan with the planning staff, we'll kind of walk you through the site plan real quick. And so this is kind of representing what is taking place for around the overall development. Along 2nd Street, we are going to be adding a 8-foot sidewalk off the back of curb, along with tree wells along the entire perimeter. And then when it gets past the corner of the building, it converts to an 8-foot walk with a 6-foot landscape strip that separates it from the street. As well as Broad Street, the sidewalk will be pulled off. It'll be another 8-foot sidewalk along that side and 6-foot planting strip. And then an 8-foot sidewalk again be along 1st Street. Also want to point out in this plan, it does call for the closure of Brookstown Avenue in this section here to accommodate the park and the overall development. In 2007, Green Street was closed in the original ballpark approval, so that is also shown as being closed at this point for this development. And we had a neighborhood meeting in August, and we had 89 invitations that were sent out with 18 property owners that had attended that. One of the comments of that was a concern about bicycle and pedestrian access for the closing of Brookstown Avenue. We've agreed to provide a 10-foot multi-use path kind of through the park area that would access for that and keep that kind of connection through the site for bicycle and peds. Also, we had a meeting with Amy Easter. She's with the Winston-Salem Cycling Advocacy Network, had reached out to us with concerns about that as well. And then we had a meeting with Matthew Burchick with the City of Winston-Salem Transportation to discuss wayfinding and opportunities that we could have for this site. In particular, I want to point out is with the closing of this section of Brookstown Avenue, there are proposed plans with the City of Winston-Salem Transportation right now for the conversion of 1st Street and 2nd Street to 2-way. And so that's kind of represented on the directions for this plan. So highlighted is we have Green Street closed here for the section in the ballpark, and this, of course, was closed to the center of this site as well. So anybody traveling west on Brookstown Avenue would be able to turn right onto Broad Street or left, and then they would be able to make a left on 2nd Street. And at this point now, they would actually be able to travel south on 2nd Street, which they can't not do today, and then would be able to turn right onto Brookstown. Also, they would be also have the access on 1st Street, as it currently is today, to take a left on 1st Street, take a right on 2nd Street, and then they could take a left on the Brookstown. What this also provides then is anybody traveling west on Brookstown, they could take a left onto 2nd Street and then a right on the Broad Street, currently as they can do today. Or this will also give them another opportunity to be able to turn right on 2nd Street and then turn left at a signalized intersection to be able to go east on 1st Street and then reconnect to Brookstown Avenue. So while this is being closed, it does, with the conversion, we have the opportunity for multiple ways to get around this site and the safe pedestrian movements. Brookstown Avenue, currently right now, is located on the inside of a curve, so when 2nd Street is converted to two-way, it's going to make that even more difficult to cross, so we see this as an overall improvement to the intersections for a safety standpoint for crossing. This is just a quick representative of the corner of 1st and 2nd Street. There will be some minor modifications to this as some balconies were added to this section of the building, but it's predominantly made of brick and addresses the street in a very urban form. This is a quick sketch of what kind of the park could be represented. What you see on the south side is that multi-use path, the 10-foot trail that connects the 8-foot sidewalks back and forth. So that would provide connectivity again from Brookstown for any bicyclists and pedestrians, as well as provide a great lawn and kind of an amenity space, park space as well on this corner that predominantly would be for Broad Street. And of course, 2nd Street is the main entrance coming in off of Peters Creek Parkway now into downtown in this section. This is the updated overall master plan with this site inserted into it with the park and the yellow space located at 2nd and Broad. What you're seeing down on the bottom section is this was the original approved plan for the Brand Properties development, which is not moving forward at this time. So again, this is a significant project with the developer in hand to move forward, help this ballpark plan gain traction for adding of 300 units in this area. This is a representation of the area that was sent invites for our neighborhood meeting that we had. So it was within properties within 500 feet of the site. And then some additional neighbors that were, from a residential standpoint, we pulled into that meeting as well. At this point, this completes my presentation. Porter Jones with DPJ Residential is here to answer any questions as a representative of the group, the developer group. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have at this time or at the appropriate time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Calvin McCray had signed up.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor
Afternoon.
Pro Tem. Good evening, council members.
Good evening.
Hope you all are well. I'm here to support this project. It provides
Calvin,
a
if
lot.
you state your name and address for the record, please.
That would be helpful, wouldn't it?
That's right.
Calvin McRae, 411 South 4th Street, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27101.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm here to support this project. It has so many great benefits to the community, from the park to mitigated traffic, amenities, also just adding housing. Every meeting that I go to, every company that we speak to, they say we need workforce housing. We need places for our folks to live. I see nothing but great benefit to adding additional units for folks to live. It's even better that those units would be in an area that's looking to be is prime for development. We've done such a great job as a city adding to infrastructure, and having additional residential and retail opportunities in that area would be a really great benefit for the city. I don't want to take up too much time, but I have to admit I'm really excited about the prospect of this because I actually live in the area, and I would love to have a safer sidewalk, safer places to walk, a park, and just to be able to have a more vibrant community. So when I first heard about this, I was one of the first people to sign up to show up to the community meetings and go, and I was really impressed with everything that Stemwell had to offer. And I did have questions as a resident, and they not only answered those, but made me feel better about the project overall. So thank you so much for your consideration and your time this evening, and thanks for all that you continue to do.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Keith Stone.
Keith Stone, 294 West End Boulevard, soon to be 512 West First Street. So I'm in that, basically that's halfway between my current residences. I've lived in the area for 35 years, and that particular area has not been moving in the right direction for quite some time. It's been in a somewhat of a stalemate. So I'm excited to see something finally moving and to have some progress in that area. I walk through that area 2 or 3 times a week, back and forth from seeing John over at the lighthouse. And as long as there is adequate, consideration of pedestrian access, traversing that area, both east, west, north, south, I think it's a very good plan. And, I'm currently working with a lot of people that don't have gray hair like a lot of us in here. And one of our company mottos is to take imperfect action. This isn't the ideal thing, I wanted a big swimming pool there, but, I lost. So take some action. May not be ideal, but we don't want to analyze this for another 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard for the proponents? All right. Seeing no one, I'll then ask for the opponents. Will have 15 minutes. James Snow or Swan? I can't make up that last word. James Snow, I believe. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snow.
James Snow, Snow Electric Company, 428 Brookstown Avenue. We have a business there. We've been in business since 1925, and we travel up and down Brookstown Avenue quite a bit, as you can imagine. Brookstown Avenue's had its share of closures with the bridge that goes over I-40, and it's certainly been a challenge to keep up with it, but we certainly accept that type of challenge. The one thing that concerns me, or there are more than one thing that concerns me, is I'm not aware, and maybe the council could address this, is that the property owners of Brookstown Avenue, were they advised of this?
They were. You saw the map that they notified within 500 feet of the area, I believe it was.
Well, but were the property owners, each property owners, were they sent a letter saying that this is going to happen, that we're going to close Brookstown Avenue?
That's a requirement. Mr.
Certainly, Mr. Dickey can speak to what Stem sent, but certainly the city is a requirement that we send letters to every property owner within 500 feet of the site, and that was done.
Do you have any idea when that was done? Because we didn't receive a letter.
Mr. Snow, and just looking at 428 Brookstown Avenue, you would have been more than 500 feet away from the perimeter of this site, so you would have been outside the legal mailing radius required by ordinance.
And I'm not addressing the legal mailing radius. What I'm addressing is to send the notification to the owners of property on Brookstown Avenue. 500 feet or 5,000 feet makes no difference, because we all use Brookstown. So that is a concern, and we certainly are in favor of development, but in routing Brookstown and closing Brookstown off there, it's going to make it, in my mind, somewhat difficult to negotiate that part of coming up and down Brookstown. So if they were not advised, then it makes it difficult. So That's what I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Snow.
You got it.
Appreciate your coming tonight. Anyone else in opposition to this zoning and site plan, excuse me? All right, seeing no one, there is 3 minutes for rebuttal if the proponents would like to say anything. Good. And then 3 minutes for the opponents to have rebuttal again. All right, seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed and ask Mr. King to give us a report of the planning board.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members.
Good evening.
Again, this is a request for 4.7 acres. We've seen the site already, and this is for a final development plan and master plan amendment. One thing to note is I think your agenda says 277 units. The number is 300. That was what was revised post-planning board, and that's what the delay was for. So I want to make that clear that it is 300 total units for the site. We've seen the area in question already. It's the area shown in yellow on this location map, and again, that was part of the original ballpark rezoning property from 2007. And here is the aerial photograph showing the development, or showing the existing development currently on site. A few images looking south on Broad Street. The subject property would be to the right in this image. And this is from the site looking across 2nd Street at West End Station, which has been recently constructed. And this is looking east on 2nd Street. The subject property would be to the right in this image. This is the area plan. It's located within the South Central area plan, which recommends mixed use for the subject property. And again, that was largely based on the ballpark rezoning from 2007. This was the master plan that City Council approved back in 2016 as part of the Brand Properties request. And so the area outlined in yellow is the area in question. This larger building is a proposed grocery store with other retail buildings included and a large amount of surface parking. What's been offered, which has been shown earlier tonight, is this proposed master plan, which essentially includes the development on the site plan that is before you tonight. So the two buildings, the parking deck, the 300 units, and the park area there shown to the north. Mr. Dickey did a good job of walking through the site plan. He accurately represented this. Again, two buildings, 4 to 5 stories in height, parking deck located interior to the site, one access located off of 2nd Street that will be protected by a median there that he mentioned as well. He also mentioned the .60 park area that will be dedicated to the City of Winston-Salem, programmed and developed by the developer and then maintained by the developer. And that really relates back to an original condition as part of the ballpark rezoning from 2007. It also includes the multi-use path and the 30-foot wide public access easement that runs along the edge of that property. And of course, it contemplates the closing of Brookstown Avenue in this area. These are the elevations, the black and white elevations. I just showed you the 2nd Street side here, which does show you the opening for the deck. And then this is the 1st Street elevation on the bottom of this image. So in summary, again, this request tonight is for final development plan approval and for a master plan amendment. The zoning was decided in 2007, as were the uses. Those have already been approved. The original ballpark area rezoning in 2007 contemplated a mixture of uses, including multifamily, and the image that I show you there on the right is one of the earliest drawings of the ballpark development from 2007. So again, this request does include 300 units. It is 4 to 5 story buildings with structured parking. I've got 5-story on there. The breakdown of units is 221 one-bedroom units and 79 two-bedroom units. It does include the conditions I mentioned earlier for the dedication of parkland, again, to be improved and maintained by the developer with city approval, along with a condition for the 30-foot wide public access easement and the 10-foot wide multi-use path. It is a good location for high-density residential. It's located along a growth corridor with transit. It's also located within our Growth Management Area 1, our city and town center. And again, this is consistent with the original vision for the ballpark area going back to 2007. This request was heard by the Planning Board at their September 12th meeting. There were no speakers present, and the Planning Board voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this request. And I'd be glad to try to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions, Mr. King? Ms. Clark?
The 1st and 2nd Street are shown as 2 ways versus their current 1 ways. When will that happen, and how far up 1st and 2nd Street will you go? Because they basically started this building and run west.
I may defer that one to either Damon or Jeff Fansler as the experts on that one.
Mr. Fansler, if you're, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council.
Good evening.
Councilmember Clark, specifically to your question, the limits of the two-way conversion are essentially from 2nd Street where it intersects with Peters Creek there at 1st Street, all the way down to Chestnut Street. So it is an entire corridor. It wraps around this parcel in question.
And Chestnut is actually behind here a mile.
That's correct.
Okay. So
That's
it's pretty
correct.
much the whole distance.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And that's both roads.
First and second, there are some segments, and I want to be clear, there are some segments of both 1st and 2nd Street that do not go two ways, and that was modeled specifically because of the needed capacity for the multi-lanes in one direction and where the interchanges are with the new Salem Parkway. So the limits are that, the project limits are what I mentioned, but every block does not go two-way in that segment.
Has nothing to do with this, but would you mind sending all of us the map? You gonna go 2 blocks and have to turn and then go up some more? And anyway, send me a map.
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions of staff? Councilmember McIntosh?
It's less confusing than anything.
Yeah.
And to be clear, those changes were going to occur whether this project came up or not.
That's correct. It is part of our 2018 bond referendum.
This is a question for Mr. King, and it's about on page 9 of the staff report where it talks about to remain consistent with the intent for an urban mixed-use project, future installations within the master plan will need to include residential components. Non-residential components, can you just talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So as I showed you earlier, the original vision for the ballpark and the surrounding area was to kind of have this mixed-use concept. That was what was sold to the public back in 2007, and that plan is still valid, and I think that's what staff still envisions this being. And so while what has come in so far is the ballpark proper, the Link Apartments, and now this request, I think staff included that language in the report to say to folks that come in to develop those future parcels to say, this residential is certainly within keeping of the plan, but we do envision future parcels having a mixture of uses in it. And so we wanted to kind of make that clear, and I think what is before council tonight to have this increased density of residential units at that intersection makes the possibility of having those non-residential uses in the future more viable because you've got a built-in residential population in that concentrated area. So I think you're going to, in the future, have a better likelihood of getting those non-residential uses within those future parcels of the ballpark development.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilman Larson, no question?
Mr. King can ask a few questions. Could you go back to the 2007 plan? I mean, which is what we're punching against right now, right? I mean, this is a change in site plan. So the plan that currently is approved by council is the 07 plan?
So there's a few wrinkles to this. What I'm showing you on this screen, that was essentially a schematic kind of illustrative drawing that was presented at the time in 2007. So what came to council in 2007 was, I can show you this if you like. Excuse the poor quality of the scan, but what came to council in 2007 was a site plan that showed the design of the ballpark parcel itself proper, and these darker shaded areas were essentially two-phase areas, and so there was no developer on the hook for those parcels at the time, so they were left to be two-phase. So we had sort of the schematic drawing I showed you earlier, and we had this site plan, and there was really no way to marry that schematic drawing that was shown to the public to this, and so that's why we crafted the condition for the master plan to say, at some point you've got to do a master plan to show that what actually gets built, or what is built is somewhat close to what was shown on that illustrative drawing, and so that's kind of how the connection of that condition came in. So this was the original plan, and again, what has happened since is you have a new plan of record for the Link Apartments over on the southwest corner of 1st and Peters Creek. There's a new plan of record there. But basically this 2007 plan still governs really the undeveloped parcels north of 1st Street, if that makes sense.
So in 2007, Green Street was abandoned.
It was shown on this plan. It was noted. There's a note that's too small to see, but yes, it was contemplated to be abandoned. It was probably abandoned like shortly after this zoning request was approved.
In anticipation of developing the land.
Correct.
Yes, but Brookstown Avenue was not abandoned.
On this plan, no, you can see Brookstown is just shown as its current configuration here.
So in the site plan development concept, coming forward into 2019 or whatever, the parcels to develop were one parcel that had Green Street had been abandoned years ago in anticipation of this development, and the site plan that then was available included Brookstown Avenue still being open. Until tonight, we're seeing the proposal to close it.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is a site plan now that is imposing the closing of Brookstown Avenue. And so the question to you as head of planning, would it not seem reasonable the closing of Brookstown? I mean, a lot of work has obviously gone into the development of site plans and lobbying and creating this image of what we're going to build. But the real question is, could you build a site? Could you develop on a site that still had Brookstown open? We have no idea whether you can or not, because the proposal we're seeing tonight is proposing that a road is closed, and yet that road is not closed. So why are we not closing the road first and making that determination of what site is actually available to be built on? Well, in process, in sequencing, because if we approve this plan tonight, the road is not closed. So we're approving a plan that does not actually have jurisdiction to lay on top of a road that has not been closed. So why is the I guess I'm asking about process and sequencing here.
So, Councilmember Larson, it's not uncommon to see a zoning request come through that contemplates the closure of a road. We've seen that on several occasions, and what we generally do is we include a condition of approval that basically states before you get any permits from the city, that has to take place, because otherwise your site plan is null and void. And we've essentially got the same condition attached to this request. So that's not an uncommon sequence to see the zoning request come in that contemplates the closure of a road without the road being closed at the time of consideration by this board. So I want to make that clear. I would also mention, and I can't figure out how to get this thing to rotate, there was a master plan that was approved by City Council back in 2016. There was a version that came to the planning board, and this is the area, if you can follow around, that did show Brookstown being closed. The subsequent version that was approved by this board did have a note. It showed it. This was showing it open, but it had a note pointing into it that said closure of Brookstown Avenue contingent upon study and a final approval by the city. So back in 2016, there was some discussion about that.
But this is okay. I understand that. But up until this point, Brookstown Avenue in the planning process for this area has been considered open until tonight.
Correct.
Right. And so we're deciding on something basically to close Brookstown Avenue tonight.
What's before the council tonight is final development plan approval and master plan approval, master plan amendment approval. There would be a separate action that would come back to council for the formal closure of that section.
And how is that closure advertised then? Closure of the street, because obviously what I heard earlier this evening was that certain people on this road have not been notified because they were outside of the 200-foot zone. 500-foot zone. I'm sorry. Yes. So if they're being impacted, not by a site plan particularly, they're being impacted by a road closure. I don't think anybody objects to developing the site. I mean but we're dealing with a site plan approval. Is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a road.
Let's stay on the subject here. We are talking about the site plan, not
we are
the road.
talking about the site plan, but it dictates the closing of the road. Is the point.
If you're asking about sort of the logistics of how that application for a street closure comes to the city, is reviewed and advertised, I may defer to Mr. DeCane or Ms. Carmen on that. As we do not handle those requests. I'm not as familiar with that process.
Through Public Works Committee and sets a public hearing. It'll be a public hearing before this council.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I think anybody reasonable would realize that whatever's voted on tonight is the destiny of Brookstown Avenue. Yeah.
Right. Any other questions, Mr. Larson?
Not for staff. I do have a couple other questions though that maybe could be answered by transportation.
Mr. Duquesne?
So
yes,
the idea of bifurcating a thoroughfare through the city, I don't know if any other council members would welcome having a main feeder road into their ward bifurcated all of a sudden with very little consultation to the residents that are being
Is there a
impacted.
question there, Mr. Larson?
Yes, there is a question here. So to get around this change that's being made, would you describe, and we had some explanation about the route, the alternate routes. Are these going to be signed? Because we're going to have a road that's going to have the same name, but it's going to be divided by a block or two of development here. And so how do people know where to go if they're going on Brookstown Avenue, how to get through that?
Well, there's probably several answers to that question. I apologize for my voice, by the way. I've got a little thing going on. So the short answer is that the city council has the ability to rename the city streets. So a bifurcated street could be renamed into north and south, east and west, that sort of thing. That's one option available to the council. Otherwise, when a street is closed, obviously there would be notification and probably some temporary signage for some length of time, but eventually the traveling public becomes accustomed to the new routes and they just adapt to it.
So you don't anticipate any signage directing people from one part of Brookstown to another part of Brookstown?
Initially, with the closure, Councilmember Larson, we would certainly direct traffic around there.
I think that would be
But
useful.
at some point, regular travelers of that route are going to become familiar. And with the two-way conversions downtown, the traffic patterns are going to be substantially different in that area to begin with.
Right. I do have a question then for maybe the developers, and it came up from Mr. McCray, made a point, and I'd like to clarify that. He talked about workforce housing. Is any of this workforce housing? Is any of these units going to be affordable or workforce housing? Or are they all market rate?
Someone could speak to that, please.
Good evening. My name is Porter Jones. I'm with DPJ Residential, and we are the developer of the project.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We do not have quote-unquote affordable or workforce housing as allocated into the project.
So this is all market rate housing?
This is market rate housing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark had a question, then Councilmember
Just
Scipio.
briefly, the issue of the road closing is on the committee agenda for Public Works next week.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Councilmember Scipio, question?
I do have a question about the conversion of the roads from one-way to two-way. Will there be on-street parking around this facility, or is it expected that all the parking for anyone living there and visiting that would be in this deck, and there would be no on-street parking on these two-way streets?
Fansworth.
Thank you again. Hello, council members again. Councilmember Scipio, to answer your question directly, the boundaries the road network surrounding this property in question will not have on-street parking. They're Broad Street, and there are segments that will have on-street parking. We're actually creating some on-street parking just on the other side of Broad Street, just a couple hundred feet. Not even that far, technically, on the other side of Broad Street. There is some additional on-street parking, but First Street and around Second Street, those two in particular related to the two-way conversion, and this property will not have on-street parking.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
They don't have it now, do they?
That's correct.
Yeah. I go there every morning. I don't
All right.
know.
I'm going to recognize Councilmember McIntosh.
I move for approval of one, statement of consistency for approval of this item, and two, W2936.
Is there a second? Motion and second. Councilmember McIntosh want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I want to point out that the decision that this council makes on a routine basis, there's always a weighting of costs and benefits. This council 12 years ago decided that this was an investment that the city of Winston-Salem should make. This is an opportunity to cash in on that investment. We owe it back to the taxpayers to raise revenue from this, and also bring 300, 350 people downtown to continue the vibrancy of what we're seeing downtown. The first time that I sat down with the developer and with Mr. Stimmel's office, the first things I brought up were how this property addresses the street and the closure of Brookstown Avenue. Through a series of several conversations, changes were made as much as could be done to keep the project viable and profitable. And I feel like the proponent has done everything they can to listen to what we want. widen sidewalks, bigger trees, to make accommodations for what we have wanted to do. So there's some incumbency on us to accommodate some of the pedestrian and bike needs. There's wayfinding that needs to go in, again, regardless of whether or not this project occurs. The traffic situation around that area is going to change. When Business 40 reopens and First and Second Street go two-way, regardless of what happens with this project, everybody's going to have to learn a new traffic pattern, whether Brookstown's open or not. I crossed from Brookstown across Broad as seldom as humanly possible. There's a pucker moment when you go across that street where you just hope there's nothing coming around the corner that you don't see. It is not a safe intersection. This intersection on the other side where you're crossing 2nd Street isn't safe either, and it's going to get worse with two-way conversion. When you really spend time and really think about the traffic patterns post-development and pre-development, that area will be safer for pedestrians and safer for vehicular traffic. It'll take some time to get used to, but you know what? We got used to Business 40 being closed really quick. Not that it wasn't painless, and some people's businesses suffered. I grant that that's probably going to happen here too, but there's going to be 700 new residents there within a 2 to 3 year period of time that want to give their business to somebody. If you're able to adapt to that clientele, you'll make more money. So this offers $250,000 plus to our bottom line every year in perpetuity. It offers $300,000 a year to the county in property tax every year in perpetuity. It gives us a park that we don't have to pay for, develop, or manage. So there are multiple reasons why this is very good for the city of Winston-Salem. It's going to cause a little bit of inconvenience, but I don't believe it's going to be a deal killer, and I think this is something that we should all support.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Councilmember Burke, could I ask you?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, every time I'm on Broad Street and when I look over at the ballpark, I think about the vision that this council had to make sure we became the owners so that we wouldn't have a hole sitting there, because if we did, then we wouldn't have the development that we see that's coming today. I think it's a wonderful project, just that I need the attorney to define so the public will not misunderstand. When we talked about developers coming in to build, and we talked about workforce making easier for people on incomes, not like some incomes to stay, just define what that is all about.
Well, in terms of Mayor Pro Tem Burke, council members, in terms of a rezoning item and trying to make the housing workforce or affordable housing, there is not clear statutory authority to require a developer to provide for affordable housing or workforce housing as a part of a rezoning item. And it's my understanding that we have not offered incentives to this particular developer for this particular project to include affordable or workforce housing. So it's not really a component of the matter tonight.
Yes, but the reason I wanted that to be explained, because some people may leave watching, not understanding. Also, we have with incentives for some of the other developers, we put some of the tax dollars in there. This project is not with any of the tax. So I think that's the way I would have preferred for it to have been defined clearer that way. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember McIntosh had another point.
I did want to just add something. There was a tremendous amount of outreach on this project, both from the planning board sessions to the developer meetings, the neighborhood meetings. We met with the cycling community. And there are a bunch of people in the audience tonight in support of this, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to have them stand. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have a motion on the floor to approve this site plan amendment? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. The motion passes 7-1. Councilmember Larson voting no. All right, item Z4.
Item Z4, public hearing on zoning petition of Covington Wilson Incorporated from HB to GBL. Property is located on the northwest corner of Renolda Road and Fairlawn Drive, located in the Northwest Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Is there anyone in the council chamber who is opposed to this rezoning? I know the petitioner is here if there's any questions. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed, and I'd recognize Councilmember McIntosh.
I move for approval of 1, the statement of consistency for approval of this item, and 2, W-3421.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Councilor McIntosh. Item Z5.
Item Z5, public hearing on zoning petition of Noto LLC from LO to HB PBS property is located on the east side of North Broad Street and west side of North Spring Street, north of West 2nd Street, located in the Northwest Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Is there anyone in the council chamber who is opposed to this rezoning? The petitioner is here for questions. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed and recognize Councilmember McIntosh.
I move for approval of 1, statement of consistency for approval of this item, and 2, W-3423.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Councilor McIntosh. You're working hard tonight.
Better earn my money.
Item Z6.
Item Z6, public hearing on zoning petition of the Salvation Army from RS9 to RM8S. Property is located on the east side of South Broad Street across from Bond Street, located in the South Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Is there anyone in the council chamber who is opposed to this rezoning? I know the petitioner is here. Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed, and I recognize Councilmember Larson.
Thank you. It's nice to support something tonight. I move approval of 1, the statement of consistency for approval of item, and 2, W-3424.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, Councilman Larson. Item Z8.
Item Z8, Mayor Joines' recommendation for reappointments to the Community Agency Allocation Committee. Barbara O'Neill, term expiring December 2022. Jacqueline Grace Burns, term expiring 2022. Jesse Ide, term expiring November 2021. Mildred Wood, term expiring November 2021. And Theodore Milton Rhodes, term expiring December 2022.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. That's unanimous. Thank you. Item Z9.
Item Z9, Mayor Joines' recommendations for reappointments to the Citizens Budget Advisory Council. Paysetta Schuler, term expiring December 2022. Sheila Garcia, term expiring July 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. That's unanimous. Thank you. And now Z10.
Item Z10, Mayor Pro Tem Burke's recommendation for appointment to the Community Appearance Commission. Roosevelt Ledezima, categorical position, term expiring February 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that is unanimous. Thank you, Councilmember Burke. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.